Welcome back to the Girls in Marketing podcast. This week, we're chatting about Instagram's AI-generated comments because apparently bots have opinions now, why longer videos are winning on TikTok, and what a major ruling on AI art means for creators. We're also diving into new research on workplace stress and why good leadership matters more than ever. Plus, we'll be hearing from one of our wonderful community members, Valeria, who we asked for advice on growing LinkedIn company pages, and we've got plenty of tips to share. Of course, we will finish with the campaigns that we love this week, from Flow Health's Fearless Period Talk to Lipton's viral Peachgate moment. Let's get into it. So I feel like the last few weeks, there's not really been an awful lot going on in the world of marketing, which feels not very familiar, to be honest. There has been a few things. Obviously, we can chat about those, but I kind of feel refreshed because it feels like sometimes we come on and we chat and it's like there's so much happening, but actually there's been some really good campaigns. We can talk about those later. But at the moment, in terms of what's new, there's not actually that much happening. The first thing, obviously, we wanted to mention was about Instagram experimenting with AI generated comments, which I know is like so strange.
It's another in, kind of the series of Instagram's constant updates to the platform, some of which users are, really actively asking for and really looking forward to seeing. And then this one that's introducing AI generated comments. I think I've seen, some people have kind of got access to this feature already. I think it's like a pen with a star next to it or something, apparently is how it appears, where people can kind of click that and Meta AI provides like prompts for AI generated comments that they can leave on a post. I think apparently relevant and contextual to what the post is. But for me, it just feels like we're continuing to go in a direction of kind of dehumanizing social media and making it less social than it should be. I just think, what is the purpose of it? And if the purpose is purely to drive engagement on content, like, is that what we want? Like, do we just want engagement for engagement's sake? I personally don't think so. It's not the type of engagement that I would want. It feels spammy. It feels bot-like. We've seen a lot of it on LinkedIn, a lot of kind of really spammy, just regurgitations of people's posts in the comments. Basically people just kind of AI generating like a summary of what you've already said back to you, and it's like, great, that was really lovely input, thank you. And I just think, if you really actually like content, it doesn't take that long to leave a minute to leave a genuine response, a genuine kind of comment that gives your thoughts, your opinions, your genuine response to what that content is. And if you're not a big fan of it, move on and scroll past. I just think, I don't know whether it's in an attempt to create more engagement just for engagement's sake,
which is quite sad, isn't it? Because the age of social media is that we're social when it comes to things like social media, and I think LinkedIn is really bad for AI generated comments, and I see it all the time, like you said, where it's you say something and then everyone's like, oh yes, like I totally agree with this and blah blah, and I'm like, yeah, that's what I said in the post. Like you don't need to repeat what I've said.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's of course there's a space where people agreeing with things and supporting things, and that's that's great. But it's when it's like a complete regurgitation, and you kind of feel like I'd rather if someone was going to comment, they were providing their additional views or insights, or even if it is just in support, that's fine. But like, provide your thoughts. Like, what do you actually think? Like, add to the conversation, challenge what I'm saying, contribute something a bit different. And I just think that from what I saw, I think someone shared that they'd got this new update on Instagram, and some of the things were like, oh, cool, whatever, or I don't know. And it's just like, okay, but like, what? Why? Just why? And like, what does that mean for brands? Like, are brands going to start to want to aim to get more AI generated comments? Do we want to just have quantity over quality when it comes to our comments? Because I think from a brand perspective, that's not the direction that we should be looking to go in. So what does it mean for brands? Do we want to lean into the types of posts that will encourage that sort of engagement, for the fear of if we're not getting that sort of engagement, we're going to fall behind the posts that are getting a lot of that spammy sort of engagement? It's really, really difficult. And I think it makes our lives as marketers increasingly difficult to navigate what to do in the social space. But for me, not an update that I particularly like, but one that I don't really feel like I'll see them taking back. I feel like any
Yeah.
AI updates seem to be here to stay.
And also, in addition to that, Meta's reportedly experimented with AI-generated bot profiles. So basically, they're saying that this will interact like humans throughout the app. And then the benefit of it is that when a real human user posts, they'll get more responses from the bots, and then maybe like, hundreds of comments or something. So this will make you more likely to post again. And it'll encourage other people to comment as well, which I just feel is like, I don't know. For me, I think if I see loads of bots comment on a post, it doesn't make me want to comment on it as well.
No.
So I think it's really strange.
I think it just seems to be taken to, like, trying to take too much control and like directing how people are behaving.
Yeah.
It's too much of like if we get bots to comment, then other people will comment. It's like trying to, kind of use people as pawns and get them to behave in certain ways. And I just think, let's let people comment if they want to comment. Just like leave people be.
Yeah. I think it all comes back down to like the user engagement piece. I think there are a lot of social media platforms now that they want as much engagement as possible because they want people to stay on the app. So they're worried that people are going to go to other apps. Like, for example, with Instagram, they're worried people are going to go to TikTok or LinkedIn or, all the other Snapchat and whatever. So I think they're wanting as many people as possible to stay on the app and to enjoy using the app. So, and it is that bit of a dopamine hit, isn't it, really, when you post something and it gets like likes or comments and stuff like that. Maybe the thought behind that with Meta is that actually they're going to get those comments, it's going to provide that dopamine hit, and then people are going to post again. So I thought that was really interesting.
On the topic of AI, one other one that we just wanted to mention was that a court has ruled that AI generated art doesn't qualify for copyright protection, which I think is an interesting one because with the rise of AI, obviously these sorts of questions are going to come to the fore. What does copyright protection look like for people who, create AI generated art, whatever it might be? I think the conversation kind of initially came up because of somebody who was using AI to create AI generated poetry. And there was, I think they were kind of exploring what their kind of copyright rights were on it. But yeah, it's been deemed that machines can't be granted copyright because they don't have lives, meaning that the length of any copyright operability can't be measured because it's not an individual, like it's copyrighted for the duration of your life and it can't be passed on to any surviving family or anything like that. I think when it comes to AI, these lines are going to be blurred quite significantly because it's like, I think part of the reason is because it's generative AI. So basically this poetry or art or whatever, if it's just purely that the individual, like the human input is just some prompts, the majority of the work, whether it's poetry, whether it's art, whether it's an image, whatever, is created by AI. So you can't really own that because all that you've inputted is kind of the prompts to it. I think that's kind of where they're saying the boundary lies. But I think it's an interesting one. And I think there's going to be a lot more cases that we see around like how does copyright or how do rights to different works apply when AI has been used? Like, is there going to be a threshold of if AI is used a certain amount, then you still have copyright. But if AI is used more than this much, then actually you don't have copyright because it's more kind of computer generated. I just think it's going to be quite muddy waters. So I think it's something maybe for brands to consider, if they are thinking about using any AI generated imagery, video, whatever it might be, music, anything like that in their works, just kind of what that means for any copyright laws.
Yeah, we definitely discussed this in our AI webinar series that we did recently within our membership. So we had Emma Wharton. I think I might have mentioned this on a podcast episode recently, but we had Emma Wharton, who's like an AI consultant. She's really great. We did a 3-part webinar series with members. Essentially, the last one was talking a lot about copyright. And there were so many questions from people saying, if we use, for example, like Photoshop or something like that to create like a piece of art or a piece of imagery, do we like own that or don't we own that? And as you say, the waters are so muddy. Like Emma was explaining that sometimes if you make significant alterations that, you can own it, but then if you don't, then you don't own it. And the thing that came up quite a lot, which I think will be interesting for people to take away, is always check with the tool that you use to generate whatever you generate. So for example, if it is Photoshop, what are the policies? What are the usage rights of that? again, if you're using something like ChatGPT, have a look at the policies. What are the usage rights of it? If you're creating imagery or anything, just have a look into the policies and make sure you're doing it regularly, because another thing that was mentioned is that they change all the time. So they're always updating their usage policies. It might be that 1 week it says this and the next week it says something else. So what I would definitely advise people to do is go away and make sure they're having a look at those policies if they are tending to use generative AI and, for any marketing material, any advertising material, because it is very, it's a massive grey area for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree. So just thought it was an interesting update to kind of bring to people's attention. So if they are using it, maybe go and have a look at the landscape. I thought an interesting one, just a very quick update, is that kind of some research and some information according to Buffer is that longer clips are seeming to gain more traction and engagement on TikTok than previously, which I think is really interesting. And I think it also is interesting when you consider Instagram's recent move, I think it was early this year, to kind of extending the length of reels to 3 minutes, even though previously they've reported that any videos longer than 90 minutes, they don't do as well, they don't get as much engagement. I think it's interesting, they're always flip-flopping back and forth, aren't they? But the fact that longer videos on TikTok are getting greater engagement and more watch time, I think is interesting and potentially something for brands or creators to consider. I was thinking about this and I was kind of reflecting on why it might be, and I think probably for me it's that most of the videos that are longer like that on TikTok, that generally, I would say probably 90% of the time, they're like those very storytelling driven stories, very personal stories, aren't they, from creators that like you kind of get invested in, you want to know what's happening. Generally the people who are telling the stories are really good storytellers. To capture someone's attention for that long now on social media is like, it's hard. And particularly as a brand, I'm speaking here on kind of creators, as a brand that's like 10 times harder. I think a lot of the time for people, when they see that it's kind of brand content, immediately that's a bit of a, oh, okay, we'll move away. So it might just be an interesting one for any brands that work with creators on TikTok to consider how their strategy might be in a position where it could evolve to building in some of those kind of like story-led pieces that actually engage users, whether it's across just one video, whether it's across a video series, get people invested in the content, and for brands to work with creators on that sort of stuff, because they seem to be doing well. I think we've always seen TikTok as that app that's like that immediate dopamine hit. It's like a quick TikTok dance and people move on, but I think there definitely seems to be a shift happening there. So interesting for how brands can lean into that.
I love that for our attention spans. I feel like so many people are like, our attention spans are getting shorter, but actually
people want longer
maybe
stuff.
Maybe it's not. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think they are, but the fact of, as you say, storytelling pieces, people are interested if they're really personal, if people are good storytellers. I do think a series does really well all the time. You've seen so many series across, even when we kind of seen the launch of TikTok and the rise of it, even back then, series did really well, but now they seem to do even better because people are so invested in people's stories. Even if, for example, a video is only 2 minutes long, but then they do it every single day or multiple times a day, people are really invested in creators' lives specifically. But if a brand is able to do storytelling, and it is, even if it's, for example, like around the founder, so like a personal branding piece, something like TikTok, it could be a really good sort of angle. I've seen like quite a few brands doing that, obviously personal branding, but on TikTok instead of the typical sort of LinkedIn. I think Amy from Odd Muse is a really good example of that. She's always super active on TikTok and does a lot of storytelling, a lot of behind the scenes. Yeah. The content that she does sometimes is like quite long, not necessarily in length, but in terms of like the story as well. I think it's a really good angle for brands to get on board with, because as you say, as a brand, it's really hard to get out there, especially on, video sort of platforms. But if you can do a piece on a founder or on, the CEO or something like that, I think that could be a really good in that isn't necessarily just having like a brand account. I definitely say brand accounts work, but sometimes people want that whole like people connect with people follow people. So I think it's a really interesting point, is that actually maybe our attention spans aren't getting shorter, which I love for us. I wanted to mention about the Google shielded email stuff. So we mentioned this actually last week in our Q1 updates in the membership. So every quarter we do like a basically like a full roundup. And we mentioned this, and I thought it was a really interesting one because it's not social, it's actually email, which I think email updates come out all the time, but social updates just tend to be around more on the kind of...
They're more spoken about.
Yeah, they're more spoken about.
Yeah.
So this update essentially is very similar to what Apple's already incorporated, which is basically like you'll be able to create aliases for your email. So when you're subscribing to email lists, when you're signing up for like free stuff, you'll be able to use an alias. What it also means is you don't have to unsubscribe to emails. You can just deactivate or delete an alias. So in the same kind of thing is that actually people might not be unsubscribing to your emails anymore. They might be using aliases to sign up. There's quite a lot of issues with this from a marketing perspective. Obviously, from a consumer perspective, it's probably like, that's ideal, that's great, I love that idea. From a marketing perspective, it makes tracking really hard. It makes understanding your list quality really hard. So if, for example, you do a lot of email and you do a lot of email marketing, it's always worth doing a full scrape of like your email list at the moment, because if you've got high bounce rates, or if you're not seeing a massive open rate or a massive delivery rate as well, so the amount of emails that are going to people's inboxes, it could actually mean that people are maybe using something like Google or Apple to kind of shield their real email address. In terms of what you can do, being honest, not an awful lot, which is unfortunate, again, from a marketing perspective. I think it's just really important that you can put yourself across as much as possible as a trusted brand, so that people feel like they want to get your emails and that they will sign up with a real email, rather than an alias. And also at the same time, making sure that the emails you're sending, they're not spammy, they're not full of rubbish, they are straight to the point, they're clear, they're concise, and then people will stay subscribed to them instead of, maybe deleting the alias that they used before. We had a discussion in the Q1 updates and everyone was really interested in that as well, because someone said, is that why I've got high bounce rates at the moment? And it could be, it might not be, but it potentially could be. So I think that's kind of being more rolled out now. So interesting one to keep in mind if you are someone who works a lot in email or email marketing.
Yeah, no, interesting. So moving on to some industry research. So this piece of research actually was suggested by you, Olivia, wasn't it? You found it. And it's not necessarily directly linked to marketing, but I think it's a really good thing to sometimes step out of our marketing bubble and look at some research that kind of applies to the wider workplace, because, obviously as marketers, we work within the general workforce as well. So I think it's a really interesting one. And it is the latest Workforce State of Mind report by Headspace, that's what they're called. And it focuses on how organisations can build healthier, more productive businesses by supporting employee mental health, which is a really important topic, something that we're both obviously huge advocates for in the workplace, outside of the workplace. And we wanted to kind of bring people's attention to it, and in the hopes that it might provide some valuable insights for them, things that they can think on and reflect on for themselves as employees, or for themselves as employers or managers or whatever it might be. Take it away, share it with their teams, and just do a bit of a reflection piece on it. But some of the interesting statistics that I think came out of it were nearly half, so 47% of employees and 2/3 of CEOs say the majority of their stress or all of their stress comes from work and rather than from their personal lives, which isn't, a nice statistic to say. Pretty much half of employees and 2/3 of CEOs experience majority of their stress from work. It's not a nice thing to read. And I think it kind of shines a light on the fact that, there is such a need for a focus on mental health in the workplace, whether it's support from employers, whether it's, kind of training for people internally on how to support those within their teams who need to be able to, switch off better from work, deal with stress in work better. I just think that's quite a stark statistic that, should be taken seriously, definitely.
Yeah, I think the whole idea behind just being more aware of what's going on in like your team, for example, I think from a managerial perspective is so important. And mental health is something obviously that you can't necessarily see. So like if someone's arm is broken, it's like, make sure you rest your arm up. Like, you don't need to do any writing, and I bet typing is like really hard for you at the moment. But if someone's really struggling with the mental health, it's not like, take a day off, or your brain's not working today, like don't worry, or anything like that. So just because you can't see it doesn't mean to say that it's not going on. I think it's so important to make sure that you're aware of that, and the fact that sometimes work is a good thing and it can take your mind off mental health, but sometimes it can actually have a negative impact as well if you've got pressure from maybe managers, or you've got pressure from like teammates or colleagues or something like that. I really liked this report. I know that sounds a bit weird to say I like this report, but I think it's really important. And as you say, it wasn't focused on marketing per se, but it is the workforce in general. And actually, one of the statistics was really stark for me. 1% of employees say that work stress has ended a personal relationship for them, like has caused the personal relationship to end, which I think is like, I know 1% isn't a massive amount, but actually that's so crazy that is even the case. And also 39% of employees report that work has negatively impacted their ability to either like care for their family, children's mental health, stuff like that, which actually doesn't surprise me.
No.
Because I do think that there is a massive lack of support there for parents when, obviously when people have children. The fact that is such a kind of new chapter for a lot of people, having the support there from a mental health perspective as well is really important.
Yeah. And I think what I like about the report as well, and why I would definitely recommend that people go away and read it, is that there's some really good recommendations of what people can do as well. So things like encouraging your employees to set healthy boundaries. So I think that, it's all well and good for, employees to be told, you can, you should do this, or, whatever. But actually, as an employer or as a manager, give them the time and the space to do that. Allow them to, put some time in their diary that they even if it's just specifically taking the time to go and have their lunch. I think a lot of people work through their lunch times. They don't necessarily feel that they can put in place those small boundaries that they are entitled to through their jobs. Allow them to, put in their diary that I saw a post from somebody the other day saying something about how they actually openly in their diary put that, every week they have like a therapy appointment, and they're like a manager, and they said something along the lines of, I put it openly in my diary so everyone can see, because I want to encourage that space of people feeling like they're able to do it as well. So if I'm openly sharing that I'm doing it, then it's kind of creating that opportunity for my employees to do the same. So actually encouraging them to do things that feel like the right boundaries for them is important, and not just kind of, looking and appearing to be an employer that supports it without actually putting anything in place.
Yeah, I think another thing as well is the boundary piece in terms of like just respecting people's time outside of work. I think there are a lot of brands and organisations that, because people work different hours, right? So if you choose to work until 8 p.m. at night, maybe, for example, if you are someone that maybe gets up a bit later or whatever, if you've got that flexibility, don't always expect other people to work at that time as well. Even if you are a manager, or even if you're, someone who isn't a manager, making sure that you understand, this is the boundaries, this is when people work. I really like it when people have, if they do work flexibly, when they have it in their email signature. So I have seen a lot of people who say, I work like random hours, so don't feel the need to like reply to me or something like that. I've seen people who put their working hours in their diary as well, or even if they say, for example, like an out of office, to say like, I don't work like these days or something like that, or on the email signature say, I only work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or something like that. Because again, that gives people the acknowledgement of the fact that they won't reply, or even if you are emailing those people or you are speaking to those people, that they won't reply until they're back in work as well. So I think it's always really making sure that that's a conscious effort, but there's some really good kind of takeaways and things in there that you can make sure kind of you're doing for your organisation as well.
100%. So I definitely think it's a worthwhile read, whether it's directly relevant for your role or not. I think there's something for everyone to gain from it. Moving on to the section now where we get answers from members of the marketing community. So in the section this week of your questions answered, we've actually got Valeria Bushiova, who is a B2B regional marketing manager and actually a valuable member of our Girls in Marketing community. She's a Girls in Marketing member. She actually leads some of our B2B networking sessions within the membership as well. She does an amazing job. We recently met up with her at one of our Girls in Marketing events. She's just yeah, she's incredible. She's really great. And this week we asked her, what are your top tips for growing a corporate LinkedIn page? So she's got some valuable insights to share with us.
Okay, when it comes to organic growth, LinkedIn is going to reward consistency and high value content. So the more intentional you are with your topics, the more likely it is to A, reach the right people, and B, perform. Engagement should also be a priority over followers, which you probably need to get some of your stakeholders on board with, that followers are a vanity metric, and it's better to have the right people engage with you than have the wrong people follow you with just no results. And remember, engagement's also a two-way street. So be proactive in reacting to page mentions and other posts by real people in the feed from your corporate account, which will also help LinkedIn score you as a higher value profile and improve your overall organic reach. Now, when it comes to paid growth, every ad targeted to a certain audience on LinkedIn is going to get a calculated score. So it'll be relevance times bid amount equals combined score. And for your ad to beat out the other ads that are competing for that very audience, you're going to need to have the highest multiple. So if you have a really limited budget, you should increase your predicted value multiplier. You could do this by improving your company profile's organic engagement, but you honestly might be better off focusing on boosting top performing organic posts rather than trying to run these large ad campaigns that realistically your budget just can't support. And if you do have a lot of budget, make the most out of your bid. You've got to test. LinkedIn's published best practice is for every ad you run, have 2 to 3 variations where you change one variable at a time. So maybe it's the same graphic and just different copy. And across the board, your best growth is going to happen when you find the right balance between organic and paid activities. Good luck.
Amazing. Love that. Yeah, she knows her stuff. She works in B2B. I think LinkedIn is a really challenging beast for a lot of marketers. And I really appreciate what Valeria shared there because, you know, I think it's so important to focus on your organic content as well as a brand. And I think a lot of people, they see LinkedIn and they immediately just think like, I've got to put money into ads. But actually, you know, like she said, to really kind of see any huge successes on LinkedIn with ads, you've got to have a decent size budget. And unfortunately, there's not that many brands who are able to necessarily dedicate that. Obviously, there are a lot of brands that can, but a lot of people work for organizations that just don't have the ability to put enough of an ad budget behind LinkedIn ads to necessarily see the benefit that they might want to. And like she said, if you are going to put money into paid ads on LinkedIn, having a really, really airtight organic strategy is going to really benefit you. And, you know, there are alternatives to putting money into full-on ad campaigns and boosting some of your best performing, you know, organic content can be a good alternative. But I think a lot of marketers, particularly in B2B, maybe if they're kind of new to LinkedIn, they see it as, you know, we've just got to jump in and throw budget at it straight away. But I think getting the foundations right is key. It's key with any platform, isn't it? But yeah. I think particularly with LinkedIn, because of the costs associated with ads and stuff like that, getting a really good foundation for your organization's company page from an organic perspective is really valuable. So yeah, really appreciate her sharing that and all of the other wisdom that she shares with our members in the membership. It's great.
I love what she said about kind of boosting an organic post that has done really well, because obviously if an organic post has done well on a company profile, it means that the current people or whoever is following have liked it enough to engage with it. So by boosting that, you're then obviously going to hopefully reach more people that are of a similar kind of demographic and that sort of thing. But also because a lot of people talk about boosting posts, especially on kind of more the meta platforms, as like a negative thing. So I've heard so many paid ad specialists say never boost a post.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting to understand that on LinkedIn, because of kind of budget restraints and whatnot, it might actually be better to try that instead of, as Valeria said, running a full campaign that you put, you know, potentially tons and tons of money into. You can kind of boost a post. And again, what you said about the variants as well, making sure that you have different ad sets and changing the variants so you can see what's working and kind of what's not. So yeah, really, really interesting.
Yeah, useful piece. Definitely something that we get asked a lot by the community, which is why I reached out to Valeria to give us her insights, because yeah, sometimes it's good to get other people's perspectives on these things that they work in day to day, isn't it?
Definitely.
So we're going to move on to some of our staff picks. So this is where we usually talk about kind of some of our favourite campaigns, or just not even necessarily always favourites, just kind kind of like, you know, noteworthy things that have been happening in the industry that we wanted to kind of share our thoughts on or whatever it is. So one that we wanted to talk about, which isn't super new, it kind of happened at the back end of last year, but there's been recent conversation around it, is the Jaguar Land Rover rebrand. So I'm sure anyone listening to this will be familiar with the rebrand. There was a huge and like very swift backlash against this rebrand. I'd say very much so in the marketing space, you know, on LinkedIn, marketers were jumping on the bandwagon here, there and everywhere, talking about what they liked about it, or mostly, to be fair, what they didn't like about it, how they thought it had ruined the brand and their identity, and it was just too much of a stark move away from their brand, all that sort of stuff. There's recently been more conversation around it, as the US CMO has actually discussed how they've navigated this backlash at a recent event. And I think it's interesting because obviously the rebrand itself started off in a very abstract way. They deleted everything from their socials. They reintroduced this sort of completely new brand that seemed to have a completely new target audience demographic. They didn't actually release or announce any new cars either. It was very much like an aesthetic. It was like different kind of like stylistic stuff that they were sharing. Which I think confused people a little bit. But what it did do is, beyond just causing a backlash about the brand, it actually kind of started a bit of a personal attack on people who worked within Jaguar, which I don't think is nice at all, obviously. There were a lot of people calling out, like people kind of from the internal Jaguar teams, within the internal Jaguar marketing teams, calling out people at various different levels and kind of questioning how they'd let it happen, what their thoughts were like, and really kind of negatively going on individuals, which, you know, we see a lot of the time, people critiquing brands and you know, what they do. But I think to kind of go deeper than that and be seeking out individuals and really openly criticizing them, I think is quite harsh. And the Jaguar US CMO has recently spoken at this event, basically just talking about what this backlash meant for them and how it kind of affected them as a team. Talks about how, despite that like kind of really personal attack and stuff like that, it kind of brought the Jaguar team and family together quite a lot over this rebrand. And actually talks about how, you know, since then there have been like kind of really some positive things that have happened post rebrand. You know, they obviously then actually announced the cars and, you know, the new kind of designs and stuff like that. They've had some really positive success and feedback in the US, which again could have been what their biggest motivation behind the rebrand was. And I think what it just highlights for me is that, you know, unless you work for a brand, you don't know why they are introducing a rebrand. You don't know why they're doing a campaign. You don't know what it is that they're looking to achieve. You know, as an individual and outsider, you might say, yes, I don't think this is a good idea. But actually, I don't, you know, and you can say that. Obviously, I'm not saying people can't say that, kind of like, you know, subjectively, I don't think this is a good idea. You know, I prefer Jaguar the way they were. But with all due respect, you're probably not the people that they're trying to target with the rebrand. You don't know what their internal objectives are. You don't know what discussions and conversations have happened behind the scenes that have meant that they've come to the decision where they feel like they need to do a rebrand. Like, at the end of the day, a brand like Jaguar is huge. It's got a huge heritage. It's got such a huge name. They're not going to take a decision like that lightly. So there's obviously some rationale behind it. Whether or not even then it's successful and actually helps them achieve the objectives that they've set internally is a whole different topic. But without knowing what those things are, I do think that sometimes, you know, because everyone's chronically online and we see everything as it happens in the moment, everybody wants to be part of the narrative about what they think. And I don't know, I just think it's an interesting look into how I think, you know, brands are being so closely observed under the microscope now. And actually, should we allow things to just pan out a bit more before we jump on and share these initial criticisms?
Yeah, I think people are so quick to jump on like the bandwagon. People are so quick to judge and to say, you know, what about, you know, this or that sort of thing. And people will always have an opinion.
Of course.
But as you say, you never know kind of what's going on behind the scenes of a brand. Speaking of the Jaguar rebrand, we're partnering with Advertising Week for this episode and attending their jam-packed Advertising Week Europe event in London next week, where Rawdon Glover, the MD of Jaguar, will be discussing the rebrand. As well as this, there will be exclusive case studies from other big brands like Ryanair, Samsung and Burger King, who will be talking about their recent Bundles of Joy campaign. There are still tickets available with different pricing options, and a discounted student pass too. There's so much value crammed into 3 days, and we can't wait to meet lots of other marketers there. Grab your ticket on advertisingweek.com or click the link in the description of this episode. Something I wanted to mention off the back of that actually is that why are all brands like killing their products or mascots, please? I mean, obviously we've seen Duolingo doing it, and that was very much like original, which I think Duolingo are quite original in that sense. They always feel to be 10 steps ahead. Lipton Tea said that they were discontinuing peach iced tea, which I felt like was a personal attack. But then they came back and they said, something about like, is it not April Fool's Day? Yeah. We're not, which was very confusing because I seen so many people saying, oh my gosh, like I need to go and buy like, litres and litres of peach iced tea. Did they do it because they wanted people to do that? Like what was the reasoning behind that? Or they kind of created a post that was basically like, peach iced tea is dead sort of thing, which is very similar to obviously what happened with Duolingo as well. But I think they jumped back on it well too quickly. Yeah. Like, I don't know what their objective was there. If it was just like a bit of an experiment or thought, we'll just try this, or they didn't maybe realise how big it would be and it would kind of like pop off as much as it did. And then actually what happened last week was another brand, so Lynx, have put on a post saying that they're discontinuing, so they're killing their Africa, like Lynx Africa sort of scent. But they've done it in a very similar way. So there's so many brands now, that are coming out. I think the Lynx Africa thing is legit. I don't think it's an April Fool's like joke. But so many brands are coming out.
I thought they'd announced that they were like it was a joke. Maybe not. Maybe I've just in my head assumed that it was a joke. But this is part of the problem, isn't it? Because someone sees that original post. Oh, no. It is a joke because they've done another post. Christmas is saved. No, it wasn't an April Fool's joke. Sorry to all the panicked nans who nearly had a meltdown after yesterday's announcement. Don't worry. Your go-to Christmas gift is safe. Anyone who stockpiled links, blah, blah, blah. We've simply decided to change the design of the can.
No, see.
So, I mean, I'm sorry. Like, I get it. They're trying to put themselves back in the spot. Like, listen, at the end of the day, we've just said about the Jaguar thing. We shouldn't be too quick to criticise. I just think, I don't know. I guess with Duolingo, it was an original idea, and also it was very much aligned with who they are as a brand. This brand tone of voice, this brand personality, this brand that they have built over a long time throughout their content that is very, very consistent and people know in an instant. I just don't know if those other brands have that same, known and established brand personality, or, that way of speaking and that way of doing things where it feels like, oh yeah, this feels natural for them. It kind of feels really jarring. Like, what? Oh, okay, I'll go out and get all these peach iced tea. Oh, it was a joke. Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
What? Why?
I mean, it shows.
It's just a bit baffling.
I didn't even know that the Lynx thing was a joke. Yeah. So I seen it the other day and said, oh, it's discontinuing. And I was thinking that's so strange because it's like the most popular, well, in my head, it's like the most popular product. It's like, as they said, it's
the one that you think of.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if I'm a massive fan of it, to be honest with you. I think people are obviously taking inspiration, as you say, without really having the brand tone there. And I think it really comes back down to a piece on brand, to be honest, and how much that's linked to social media, to marketing in general. And that, as a brand who maybe has never done anything like this before, that is quite rogue to just all of a sudden say, oh yeah, like let's pretend that one of our products is dying.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. And I mean, I guess on the other hand, you could look at it and say, maybe is it clever for like the likes of Lipton to like preempt the April Fool's things, and something like that might just get lost if they were to do it actually at the start of April. And maybe it is a good way to do it a little bit early, beat the other brands that are getting to doing their April Fool's jokes, product discontinuations, whatever. I am really intrigued to see what else we see brands doing in the lead up to April Fool's, because I don't know, it's just one of those things, isn't it? It's like, is it necessary? Is it a great way? Is it a great way to get your product being spoken about again? Yeah, potentially it's a great move. Again, like I say, I don't know what the effect has been, on the sales of peach iced tea, whether it has made a huge impact, whether people have started to really search it and stock buy it, and maybe that was the intention, and maybe it has had that kind of payoff. But I don't know. Excited to see what other brands are going to do. Hopefully in the next episode we'll be chatting about that.
Yeah, I think April Fool's is a really interesting one. I feel like, you know who we haven't spoken about on the podcast for a long time, who I'm about to speak about? It's Grace Beverley.
Oh, for a long time, what, like an episode?
I think a few episodes. I remember a few years ago maybe, she spoke about how April Fool's is a really good way to see what the reaction would be to things. So for example, she said about launching a certain product line or a certain colour of a certain product line that's maybe really outgoing, or like a neon one or something like that.
Just something really completely good, off-brand or
exactly
new, yeah.
To see if it is something that your audience typically react to. So I think maybe something like Lynx and Lipton are thinking, if we did do this, maybe Lipton were thinking, maybe we do want to discontinue our peach iced tea, see what the reaction is. And then, if they get the hype around it, they think, okay, actually, maybe, I don't know if that's a great thing to do.
But also surely you've got better data and insights on product sales to make that decision internally based off of is this product actually still selling? Do people still want it? Then putting out people. I mean, just ask people do we still like it?
Yeah.
Do you still want it?
Rather than killing it off. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Interesting one, definitely.
I also wanted to mention, just to kind of round up our things of the week, Flow Health have done a campaign that is basically talking about female health. So I'm a massive fan of Flow anyway. I think they've done some really good campaigns in the past. I think they're really integral in terms of women's health, women's menstrual health especially. Basically they have kind of come off the back of, so last year Hootsuite did their big kind of giant newspapers off the back of actually a few different brands doing giant newspapers. I was actually very fortunate enough to be involved in the Hootsuite giant newspaper campaign, which was really cool. So Flow Health have done a very similar thing where they've went out into public and they've got these massive kind of giant campaign newspapers, and they have things on them. So essentially they wanted to kind of bring to life what happens in the everyday Flow community. So the fact that Flow is a judgment, they say a judgment-free kind of space and that sort of thing. So they armed copies of the TMI, so the menstrual issue. TMI I also love because people say that for too much information. So love that. Essentially it's just things that we would as women typically keep behind kind of closed doors. And essentially they went out onto the streets of London, had these amazing essentially posters, but they were kind of newspapers with loads of different things on. And I just think it shows that actually these sort of activations and experiments that are out in the world can also do really well online as well, because whilst you might have done a campaign in London that maybe gained the eyes of a few hundred people potentially, they've went and put it online and it's blown up on social media. So there was loads of really interesting things that you maybe wouldn't even think in terms of certain things that women have went through that relates to menstrual health and stuff like that. And I think it just kind of brings back to the point, well, over 500 million young women and girls suffer every day with their menstrual health. And I think it is kind of not spoken about enough. 100%. So brands like this, it's really important to speak about it as much as possible.
I think speaking on these topics, particularly the things around menstrual health that feel a bit more taboo, they feel a little bit more, I think what it highlighted was some of the things that are the more kind of the symptoms or the things that people go through that feel maybe a bit more embarrassing, that maybe one of those things I think where you're I don't know if that's just me that experiences that every month, or you feel almost too scared to say it to a friend, but then they might bring it up and you're oh yeah, no, I experienced that as well, but I thought it was just me and I didn't want to mention it because it's quite embarrassing. It's quite a personal symptom or something that you just thought oh, I don't know if that's normal. And I think that breaking down those kind of taboo barriers is really good, and doing it in this sort of way, like you said, it's become quite a popular way for brands to kind of get their message out there, because at the end of the day we talk about it all the time, and I've spoken about it before, particularly kind of from the perspective of charities and non-profits and stuff, but it's becoming more and more difficult to break through the noise of everything that is out there. And I think that brands are looking for ways to have more of an impact and just do things in a way that does catch our attention. And being able to have something that can translate online as well as being in person is really valuable. You know, having a team who are able to execute something in real life and then also execute it really, really well in the digital space and on social media as well. It's something that I think, you know, shouldn't be overlooked in terms of what it takes to do that and make it have that same impact online. And, you know, the work that goes into that is really great. And, you know, anyone who's got the ability to do that within their teams, you know, it's definitely something to explore how to blend those two worlds. But yeah, I like that campaign as well.
Exactly.
Really
we even did last year, we used like a giant newspaper to announce one of our programs. I think, you know, you can also do it on a budget, as you say. If you've got the team to support you, there might be some aspects that are, you know, more difficult or whatnot. But for example, with something like this, they've just got lots of different things people are saying in the community. They've put it on some like really nicely designed kind of newspapers, obviously got them printed out, and they're just having people in the streets like holding them up. We did a very similar thing. We had a newspaper printed out, I held it up, and we were talking about like the launch of a program. So I think those sorts of things you can actually do on a budget. I know we didn't spend that much on that, and that actually did really well for us in that aspect. And, you know, it could be that you want to put some budget and some time, and it's not really a budget thing for you. But also, if you want people to talk about you online or you want to spread awareness, it's a really good thing that you could do that is more budget friendly. It's kind of similar to when the whole thing was going around about people like holding up signs, which we've done again before, where it's kind of like cardboard signs. Those sorts of things, they're really stark. They do really well online. Even if you only hold them up in the street and a few people see them, you put it online and it does so well. I think, you know, we've seen lots of brands doing this, but actually like any brand can get on boards with it. If it's maybe a bit controversial or something like that, it's going to really stir up online and it'll probably do quite well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it's a really good way of, like I say, blending those two worlds. And it's, okay, flow are huge, but like you say, take inspiration from those and do it in the way that you can. And I think that's why we like to talk about these campaigns. And it's not just to shout about the big brands, it's actually to talk about what they've done, but how it can be accessible for marketers in other positions and stuff as well. So yeah, I feel like we spoke about quite a lot then, quite a lot of different things. We said there weren't many updates in the market and world, but actually I think we spoke on quite a few.
We still spoke for long
So
enough.
hopefully it was still a really good meaty episode and it gave you a lot of insights and stuff like that. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Girls in Marketing podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you picked up some fresh insights and maybe even a little inspiration for your next big marketing move. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate us, and leave a review. It really helps us reach more amazing marketers like you. Don't forget to let us know what you thought of today's episode as well. Tag us on social media and follow us for the latest updates, behind the scenes, sneak peeks, and fun marketing chats. We'll be back soon with another installment of trends, updates, and campaigns that are shaping the marketing world right now. Until then, get involved in the conversation on social media and check out our Girls in Marketing membership to join a community of incredibly talented marketers just like you. See you next time.